Hi everyone, my name is Amber Nicosia. I'm the president of the Penn South Co-op, and I'd like to welcome you to the 2021 annual meeting of shareholders. This is our 59th annual meeting and the second year that we are hosting the meeting virtually for COVID safety. Before I begin, I wanted to thank all of the volunteers who gave their time to support and care for one another during this difficult year. Our community is resilient and strong, and we adapted quickly to the challenges of the pandemic in a manner that we should all be proud of. Now I'd like to introduce you to my colleagues on the board of directors. I will list them in alphabetical order. Matthew Barilli, Charles Baer, Morris Benjamin, Lloyd Blazin, Martin DeCat, Jenna Feist, Terrence Gerchberg, Brian Hammerstein, Kim Oliver, Rocco Ottamanelli, Tracy Raposo Cook, Petra Shine, Robert Sikorsky, Sasha Tabachman-Smith. Martin and Tracy have decided not to seek re-election, and I'd like to recognize both for their service and contributions to our community. I also wanted to say a few words of remembrance for our longtime board member, Walter Mankoff, who passed away earlier this year. Walter served on the board of directors for 40 years, and for 30 of those years, he was our treasurer. He was a fixture in the management office and was deeply involved in numerous co-op activities. His efforts have saved Penn South millions of dollars over the years. His dedication and belief in service to others are an example for us all. Walter was actively involved in the topics that we will discuss in this presentation and in the annual reports. I'd like to turn this over to General Manager Ryan Diedzig, who will introduce members of the Penn South senior staff.
Hello, and welcome everybody. My name is Ryan Diedzig, and I'm the General Manager of the Co-op. Welcome to the meeting, and thank you for joining. It's my pleasure to introduce some key members of staff. Assistant General Manager in charge of administration, Lisa Gluck. Assistant General Manager in charge of operations, Lance Ashby Williams. Executive Assistant, Blair Desmond. Financial Manager, Gary Bachrach. Assistant Finance Manager, Susan Gurai. Powerhouse Chief, Ed Johnson. Education and Communications Director, Mario Mazzoni. Maintenance Manager, John Seamer. Security Director, Larry O'Neill. Porter Supervisor, Anthony Pensini. Apartment Restorations Manager, Jonathan Rivera. Apartment Allocations Manager, Carmen Santiago. Maintenance Administrative Assistant, Michael Pierre-Louis. Maintenance Clerk, Yuri DeSimone. Human Resource Manager, Tom Maloney. Facilities Coordinator, Erin Peacock. Legal Coordinator, Monica Zayak. The staff at Penn South includes over 100 people who work in maintenance, security, management, and the powerhouse. Their efforts day in and day out keep the operation running smoothly and make Penn South a wonderful place to live. I'd like to give thanks for all they do.
I'd like to extend the same thanks to the entire staff. Growing up at Penn South, I've always had high expectations, but when I became a board member, I got insight into how much work it takes behind the scenes. I want to thank the co-op employees for the wonderful service you provide, keeping the buildings well maintained and our grounds looking beautiful. Our program today consists of brief presentations, some greetings for a few of our elected officials, and a question and answer session at the end. For shareholders who want to call in a live question, a Zoom link and a telephone number will be displayed on the screen when we get to that portion of the program. Although we still have financial challenges that we need to take on related to increased operating expenses and upcoming capital projects, we've been working very hard to take advantage of every opportunity. Because of this, the outlook at Penn South is much brighter than where we were at this time last year. This presentation includes good news on several fronts. We have extended our affordability for an additional 5 years. We have refinanced our mortgage and will be saving over $900,000 a year. We were successful in securing a large grant from the federal government for COVID relief in the form of a PPP loan. And we're excited that we have a new commercial tenant named CareMax. They are a senior health care service provider, and they'll be opening a large facility on 9th Avenue and 25th Street. Now I'd like to turn it over to General Manager Ryan Dietzick, who will begin with a discussion on our mortgage refinance.
Thank you, Amber. When the COVID-19 pandemic disrupted the economy, the Federal Reserve responded by significantly cutting interest rates. This created an opportunity for Penn South to save money by refinancing our mortgage. Our first HUD loan refinance occurred only a few years ago in 2017, and the interest rate we secured at that time was historically low. However, even lower rates meant the co-op could achieve further savings, working again with HUD and our lender. Refinancing a loan of $178 million is a challenging process. The loan application took months. It wasn't until late September that we finally locked in our rate. The closing on this refinance is scheduled for later in November. Many people deserve credit, but I especially want to thank and acknowledge the hard work of President Emma Nicosia, Treasurer Matthew Barilli, Finance Manager Gary Bacharach, and Assistant General Manager in charge of administration Lisa Gluck. Our former loan had an interest rate of 3.23%. Our new rate will be 2.79%. Through this refinance, we will save $949,000 in debt payments every year for the next 35 years.
The mortgage refinance was a huge effort, but it will pay off for years to come. One way that we maximized savings was to reset the 35-year payoff period. If you were here in 2017, you may recall that HUD required us to extend our contract with New York City for the full term, which at the end was 2052. When pursuing this refinance, HUD asked us to do the same thing again. The reason this matters so much to HUD is because our city contract provides us a huge tax abatement. Currently, the savings amount to $30 million a year. New York City offers us this tax break because Penn South operates as a limited equity affordable housing cooperative. Shareholders do not profit from the sale of their apartments, and this keeps down the prices for the next generation of New Yorkers. Remaining limited equity while also getting a huge tax break is something that I and my colleagues on the board are proud to support. I am honored to have testified before the New York City Council this past May to advocate for the extension of our contract through 2057. The City Council unanimously agreed to this, and we've now secured our affordability for another 5 years, while also achieving additional savings in the process. This is one of the many ways we're addressing our financial needs this year. To speak more on this, I'll pass it back to Ryan.
With COVID, we found ourselves facing higher expenses and declining revenue in some areas. One area where we took a hit was with our commercial tenants. As everyone knows, retail stores, restaurants, and offices were closed by government order for extended periods of time. Even now, a lot of our foot traffic has still not returned. During the most challenging times, some of our businesses could not pay the full rent. We offered temporary rent reductions for some commercial tenants on a case-by-case basis. This helped businesses survive, but it also helped Penn South. There was very little demand for retail space during the peak of the pandemic in New York City. A failed business would mean that we could have an empty storefront for a very long period with no rent coming in at all. Our cooperative approach was a success. Nearly all of our businesses were able to weather these challenging times. The rent reductions we offered were temporary. Still, this cut our revenue by $1.2 million in the fiscal year that just ended. Unfortunately, 2 commercial tenants shuttered their doors at the very beginning of the COVID-19 lockdowns. We didn't receive any rent for the entire fiscal year from these tenants. We are pursuing collections, but those losses currently amount to $500,000 during the past fiscal year. In total, for fiscal year 2021, our commercial income is down $1.7 million compared with our expectations prior to COVID-19. The commercial rental market has not fully recovered, but I am happy to say that we have long-term solutions for both of the vacant retail spaces.
For the vacant storefront on 9th Avenue, I am pleased to report that the Board of Directors recently agreed to enter into a lease with CareMax. They are a health and wellness provider for seniors. Their new facility will be over 5,800 square feet. This center will provide access to the type of on-site care for cooperators that we've always wanted to make available. And the operation is large enough to also serve the greater community. This is an example of us using commercial space to serve multiple needs. When looking for commercial tenants, the board and management seek businesses that are able to pay market rents and provide revenue to the co-op. But when possible, we also strive to find operations like CareMax that support the needs of the community and provide valuable service. Regarding the vacant storefront on 8th Avenue, there is now a long-term solution for this as well, and it will affect the entire building. Before going into details about the future plans, I think it's time to take a step back and talk about the issues we're facing with our commercial building on the corner of 8th Avenue and 26th Street.
This particular building posed a number of challenges. To start, there are no windows above the ground floor. That severely limits the possible uses. Decades ago, the tennis club was given special permission to alter the second and third floors of the building. To create open spaces for playing tennis, supporting columns were removed. Now the building is not structurally rated to support a traditional roof. The tennis facility has a special variance to operate. However, other types of businesses would not even be allowed to use this space as it is currently designed. This is just a taste of the problems we are facing with this building. As engineers assessed the property, they gave estimates for repairs that were extremely high. An in-kind rehabilitation would cost $33 million. Adding another floor would bring the price to $49.7 million. This is in part because we would need to add structural columns and improved foundation and a new roof. The brand new building of similar size could cost more than $160 million. The terms of our HUD-insured mortgage do not allow us to take on further debt. If we wanted to pay for these repairs, the only option would be to raise carrying charges by a significant margin. This scenario did not make sense for Penn South. With the help of consultants, we explored our options. The only scenario that really addressed our needs was a ground lease. This involves leasing the land to a third-party developer for 99 years in exchange for reliable revenue. Through this kind of agreement, we could specify certain criteria, like the aesthetics and the building's height, to make sure that it fits into our community.
Repairing this building would cost us more than we would recover in revenue. This would make Penn South unaffordable for countless families, and so it's not an option we can consider. We also ruled out the idea of selling the land. We hired expert consultants and brought in some of the most respected companies in the city. The best option was a ground lease. With this type of arrangement, we can set the terms of all the bids. Among the requirements, we wanted a building with the same footprint, of a similar height, and with a new supermarket. We also wanted any building with apartments to include the maximum amount of affordable housing under the current Affordable New York Housing Program. When we received the bids, it was clear that one stood out above the rest, and it came from a company called MAG Partners. The building they proposed was appropriate to the surroundings, they offered the most revenue for the co-op, and the building itself was tastefully designed to fit in rather than to stand out. Most importantly, this was the best option available to serve our core needs of preserving affordability at Penn South.
Let's focus on the numbers for a moment. When the current building was at full occupancy before COVID-19, it was bringing in $1.7 million in revenue. However, of this money, we paid $300,000 in property taxes. We are also responsible for all building maintenance. Neither of these will be true with the ground lease. The leaseholder will pay all property tax and will be responsible for all maintenance. As a reminder, our commercial properties are not subject to tax abatement or other subsidy. By the second year of our ground lease, the revenue to the co-op will increase by $700,000 per year. There are annual increases built into the lease. For Penn South, the revenue will be consistent and reliable.
Steady, predictable income is exactly what an operation like Penn South needs. The purpose of Penn South is to provide affordable housing today and long into the future, and the ground lease helps us achieve this. Staying on the topic of finances, I'd like to share good news. The past year, we received $2.79 million through the Paycheck Protection Program. While this is a one-time source of revenue, it was incredibly important in bringing our current budget in line. And I'm going to ask Ryan to share more about this.
Securing money through the Paycheck Protection Program was a challenging process for Penn South. When the program was first created in March of 2020, the federal government allocated $349 billion in funding. However, housing co-ops were not eligible for any of this assistance. Later, the program was renewed, and the federal government added another $320 billion in funding. But once again, we were not permitted to access any of the money. Thankfully, a full year into the pandemic, the program was funded for a third time. This time around, the program criteria was revised to make housing co-ops like Penn South eligible. I'd like to thank U.S. Senator Chuck Schumer for leading the fight to make this change for the benefit of Penn South and other co-ops like us. This application process was also quite challenging, but it didn't stop our team. Leading the charge were Human Resource Manager Tom Maloney, Finance Manager Gary Backrack, and our late Treasurer Walter Mankoff. Although the money we received from the program is referred to as a loan, it does not have to be repaid. I'm thrilled to announce that in October we received word that our $2.79 million loan had already been forgiven in its entirety.
Getting the funds through the Paycheck Protection Program was good news and a great note to end today's presentation. To keep today's presentation brief, we only summarized a few key items from this year's annual reports. I encourage every shareholder to read this booklet carefully and learn more about the projects from this past year. Ryan's report covers topics including the new online method for completing income affidavits, the facade repairs that are currently underway, and the roof replacement that are scheduled for next year. He also mentions the upgrades to our building ventilation system, our underground pipe replacement project, and the work we are doing to prepare for upcoming gas inspections next year. In my report, I discuss how we gradually reopened co-op facilities in a safe manner and the many events that occurred outdoors this past year. It's wonderful to see cooperators resuming activities that bring the community together. An item that I give special attention to in my report is the great work by Penn South Social Services and by the staff of their largest operation, the Penn South Program for Seniors. The Penn South Program for Seniors did an amazing job of adapting their operation to these circumstances. Their staff and volunteers helped to ensure that people were safe and had their needs met at home. This was especially important during the long period when many seniors were trying to avoid trips outside whenever possible. The rich array of cultural programming also continued in a virtual setting. This included exercise, meditation, yoga, improv, writing, music appreciation, and film, to name just a few. I'd like to recognize and thank Director Ann Forge and her entire team for their superb work. Penn South Social Services, often referred to as PSSS, is the parent entity of the senior program, and they service all age groups in our community. This past year, PSSS staff and volunteers worked hard to make sure that people in our community had access to COVID-19 vaccinations as early as possible. At a point when appointments were very hard to come by, PSSS partnered with Penn South commercial tenant Chelsea Apothecary, and together they coordinated on-site vaccine drives from the Building 8A community room. 630 residents received the vaccine through this program. A huge thanks go out to Executive Director Matthew Kahn and the terrific team at PSSS and their volunteers for making this effort a success. At this point, I'd like to move to the next portion of our program, which includes brief remarks from our elected officials. Ryan will be giving these introductions.
I'd like to introduce our longtime Assembly member, Dick Gottfried. He has advocated for our community's interests in the New York State Assembly since 1970 and has been there for Penn South on countless occasions when we have needed him.
Well, hello, everyone. It's good to be with you for the Penn South annual meeting. Sorry we're not doing it in person. I hope we can get back to doing that in person soon. As you've probably heard me say before, I grew up as a child in a development in Queens, a co-op, taxpayer assisted, very much like Penn South. And so I was learning at a very early age a lot of what the principles that that make Penn South what it is. And I tell you, as an elected official representing Chelsea, it's very important to me to have the support of the people of Penn South with their very strong sense of social responsibility. That's my politics, and it's the politics of Penn South, and that's so important to our community. And I very much appreciate that I've been hearing the feedback from Penn South about a couple of hot issues at the moment, congestion pricing and the concerns about Penn South residents who of course live within what will be the congestion pricing district and may own cars and drive in and out of the district. And we're trying to work out some accommodations. So it's good to be hearing from Penn South on that. And the other issue to mention is the proposed Empire Station complex development. And we've been working together with the governor's office and the Empire State Development Corporation and the MTA to try to scale back that proposal and to make sure it's done in as friendly a way to our community as possible. And we've just been hearing that the governor is proposing to move the redevelopment of the existing Penn Station itself, which is the facility that we use for particularly for the subway, and to make that a real priority, not just the Gateway project. And that's good news. So good to be with you. Always looking forward to working with Penn South on the needs of the development in any way that I can. And thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
Now I would like to introduce Brad Hoyleman, who has represented our community in the New York State Senate for 9 years. Brad has been an ally for Penn South community whenever we needed him.
Hello, I'm New York State Senator Brad Hoyleman, and I'm so honored to be with all of you virtually today. Penn South is such an amazing community. I'm very proud to represent you in Albany. What a year it's been. This year, among a lot of wins up in Albany, I passed legislation banning ghost guns, strengthened our hate crimes law, required the translation of COVID information on government websites, expanded what are called veteran treatment courts, and passed the Gender Recognition Act for our transgender and non-binary friends and family. All this legislation is awaiting the governor's signature. As it has been for all of us this year, vaccines have been a big priority for me. I introduced legislation to finally end the unfair double standard in our current vaccine mandate that allows out-of-state performers and athletes to enter venues without proof of vaccination. Local performers and athletes, on the other hand, aren't allowed to work in New York venues without proof of vaccination. And the loophole puts the lives of New Yorkers, those who work in those venues, and fans at risk. I introduced legislation to allow pharmacists to administer the COVID vaccine to children once it's fully approved. And I have legislation to add the COVID vaccine to the list of required vaccines for children to go to school. It's so important that we all get our jab and protect our community. On another note, I know that the Empire Station project, our former governor's proposal for Penn Station expansion and development, has been on this community's mind. The proposed project would bring up to 8 super tall office buildings to Midtown Manhattan, just blocks from where you live, at a time when we almost have a 20% vacancy rate for commercial office space. They've said it's to fund Penn Station renovations, which we desperately need, but to date we haven't seen any comprehensive plans for what a future Penn Station may look like or how much it would cost. If we're going to build tall, we have to build affordable housing, supportive housing, and use this as an opportunity to deal with our homelessness housing and drug crises. Something Penn South is such a great model for in terms of housing we could replicate. In a Senate hearing on MTA finances, I asked Acting MTA Chair Jano Lieber about the necessity of adding 20 million square feet of commercial office space in Midtown to help finance the redevelopment and expansion of Penn Station. He was non-committal on the real estate development portion, saying that the transportation projects needed to be disaggregated from the real estate proposals. I couldn't agree more. He further said that federal financing specifics for the Penn Station redevelopment and Gateway Tunnel terminal haven't yet been determined. With my colleagues in government, I'm going to continue to advocate for greater transparency for the Empire Station Complex plan, keeping in mind that the redevelopment of Penn Station and expansion for Gateway must remain top transportation priorities for New York's future. Another concern that I've heard from a number of you about is congestion pricing. As a public official who represents over 100,000 constituents in the congestion pricing zone, I appreciate the framework in enacting the legislation, which includes a toll-free perimeter along the West Side Highway and FDR Drive, a tax credit for New Yorkers making below $60,000 annually, an exemption for emergency vehicles and vehicles transporting people with disabilities. While this is a good starting point, additional exemptions should be considered by the Traffic Mobility Review Board, or the TMRB. I've advocated for the TMRB to review London's congestion pricing scheme, which gives a 90% fee reduction for residents in the zone. I really appreciate your feedback and encourage you to submit comments to the MTA, which you can do through the MTA website. Feel free to copy me or contact me to share your thoughts. I also wanted you to know about legislation that I introduced recently to stop the incessant helicopter noise in our community. I've heard from a number of Penn South residents about this issue. Choppers take off and land in Manhattan hundreds of times during the week, flying over and near our homes, emitting high decibel noise and burning fossil fuels into the air we breathe. One chopper produces 43 times more carbon dioxide per hour than an average car. These helicopters are bringing environmental devastation and incessant noise, so tourists, the ultra-rich, and others can go on non-essential joyrides. That's why I've introduced legislation to put an end to the scourge by shutting down all non-essential use of city-owned heliports and the Hudson River Park and elsewhere, and opening a legal avenue to stop the nuisance of choppers coming from other states. I'm proud to join so many other elected officials and community advocates in this fight to stop the chop. Thank you to this fabulous community, and don't hesitate to reach out to me if there's anything I or my team can do to support you.
I'm now happy to introduce Corey Johnson, our representative in New York City Council for the past 8 years and also Speaker of the City Council for the past 4 years. Corey and his staff are constantly helping Penn South in big ways and small.
Hello, Penn South. I am so grateful for the opportunity to join you all today, even if it is virtually. I'm Corey Johnson, and I have had the real honor of representing you in the City Council for the past 8 years. And for the last 4 of those years, I've been proud to serve as Speaker of the City Council. And the past 2 years, as you all know, has been unlike any other. They have presented our city, our country, and our world with challenges none of us could have imagined. But my office and the City Council have been busy trying to make things better for you all. Over the last year, my office has delivered over 3,245 meals to Penn South seniors and families who had food insecurity. And the council and I successfully pushed the de Blasio administration to include $25 million in this year's budget for community-based food pantries. I was proud that the City Council and I restored critical funding to continue our enhanced sanitation services provided by ACE all across the neighborhood. ACE is a company that provides full-time employment opportunities for unhoused individuals, and ACE workers keep our sidewalks and litter baskets clean on 8th Avenue from 17th Street to 34th Street. I'm also grateful to have been able to allocate $1.5 million in capital funds to replace and renovate the deteriorating track and field at Chelsea Park on 27th Street between 9th and 10th Avenues, right across the street from Penn South. And we have all seen how important our outdoor public spaces are. And I am dedicated to making sure you all have safe and clean spaces to recreate in. And that is why we also organized a cleanup day at Penn South Playground with many volunteers from Penn South and across the neighborhood to help keep the park clean. And my office and I are continuing the community events we've done to help support you all. Next Saturday, November 13th, we will have our annual free shred event at Penn South from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. on West 26th Street between 8th and 9th Avenues. Hopefully, many of you will be able to take advantage of that opportunity and take a little bit of stress off of your plate. And I wanted to save this Penn South item for last because it is always something that has been such a high priority of mine. In this year's budget, I was able to allocate nearly $140,000 to Penn South Social Services to support our amazing programs that serve the people at Penn South. Programs like physical activity events, enhanced nutrition, and infectious disease prevention. Penn South Social Services is such a critical resource for all of the residents at Penn South, and I am always proud to support their incredible work. The council and I fought for $3.4 million to support organizations that provide a range of mental health services to older adults. These are mental health services that happen in non-clinical settings, such as senior centers, religious institutions, social clubs, and individual homes. These past 2 years have been so difficult, especially for our seniors who have been forced to remain isolated for so much of the time. And we want to make sure that mental health services are available to you in places where you're comfortable. The council has been busy passing important legislation to support our residents and businesses during this turbulent time. In February, we voted to require a COVID-19 vaccination plan for homebound seniors. The pandemic has been particularly devastating to seniors who are at the highest risk of serious complications. And sadly, that population also had trouble getting vaccinated because of hurdles in getting appointments, as well as physical challenges in getting to so many vaccination sites. That's why we wanted to make it as easy as possible for homebound seniors to keep themselves and their loved ones safe by being vaccinated at home. And following the success of the outdoor dining program and helping save many of our beloved neighborhood restaurants, the council also created an outdoor arts program. The COVID-19 pandemic has had terrible effects on New York City's arts and culture organizations. Institutions of all types and sizes have struggled to survive amidst closures, restrictions, and canceled programming. The outdoor arts programs allowed eligible art and cultural institutions to use approved open and public street space for artistic and cultural events. This not only provided opportunities for struggling artists, but also fantastic entertainment for New Yorkers. And finally, and most importantly, I really just want to say thank you. Thank you for all of the amazing years that I have been able to serve as your council member. I am term limited out of office. After this year, on December 31st, I will no longer be in the city council. So this is the last time that you will hear from me as your representative on the council, but I will still be around as your neighbor and as your friend. And during this time, it is more important than ever that we stay connected to one another, that we provide each other with support and love. And I have always felt that love and support from the residents of Penn South, and I hope that you felt it from me. I just want to thank the incredible board and staff at Penn South for our years of partnership and doing great work together. You're going to have a great city council member in Eric Botcher. He's been my chief of staff in my district for many years. And so I know you'll work really well with him. He loves Penn South and loves the community. So lastly, thank you all. I look forward to seeing you in person and around the neighborhood again sometime soon. Penn South, you are the best. I am immensely grateful for all the work we've done together. Be safe. Love to you.
Thank you to all of our elected officials for sharing remarks at today's meeting. And thank you for your continued support and advocacy on behalf of Penn South. To finish today's presentation, I'd like to highlight the wonderful artwork in this year's annual report that was submitted by cooperators. The cover image is Into the Green, a heat transfer image on paper with colored pencils and graphite. The artist's name is Akemi Takeda. This artist has another work in the booklet as well, called Visual Memo H. We also featured 2 oil paintings by artist Susan De Castro. The first is Between Buildings 7 and 8, the other is View from Inside My Living Room. We also featured an oil painting by Monique Ceres called Spring in the Penn South Park During the Pandemic.
Before we get into the question and answer period, I would like to remind everyone that the election is happening today, Sunday, November 7th, 2021, in the 8A Community Room located at 343 8th Avenue, right near the intersection of West 27th Street. Our bylaws say that at least 1/3 of shareholders must participate in the meeting for a quorum, and voting is one way of participating. Achieving a quorum is one reason that we encourage shareholders to submit a direct proxy form. If you submitted a proxy form, either online or by paper, you are automatically entered into a raffle for a gift card. The top prize is a $1,000 gift card. The election company provided a list of all households that submitted a proxy by the deadline, and we then conducted a raffle. The winners are on screen now. They may collect their prize at the security office by presenting a photo ID showing their address. If you did not submit a proxy form, or if you wish to change your selections, please vote today, November 7th, 2021, in the Building 8A Community Room from 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. Your vote will supersede your proxy. Once again, the polls will be open in the Building 8A Community Room today, November 7th, 2021, from 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. We will begin the question and answer period by reading and responding to the questions submitted in writing. Once we finish answering the written questions, we will open things up to shareholders who are calling in by Zoom or by phone, who did not already pose a written question. We may not be able to field every question, but we will do our best to address as many as possible.
Nice presentation, guys.
Thank you. So first, I would like to announce that we have a quorum.
we received more than enough proxy submissions from shareholders to achieve a quorum at today's meeting. To every shareholder who participated by submitting a directed proxy form, thank you. At this point, we typically ask for a motion to waive the reading of the minutes of last year's annual meeting and to accept those minutes.
I move to waive the reading of the minutes from the 2020 annual meeting and to accept these minutes.
Second that motion.
The motion has been seconded. Are there any objections? Hearing no objections, the motion will carry.
Excellent. Now we will go to the question and answer portion of the program. For those of you who wish to ask a live question, a Zoom link and telephone number are displayed. The Zoom link is meeting.pennsouth.coop/2021 That will direct you to Zoom to ask a live question. Again, that's meeting.pennsouth.coop/2021 question. Before we get to any live questions, we will first address all of the questions submitted in writing. That means if you are looking to ask a live question, you will be waiting for a bit. We received over 24 written questions, so let's get started. The first question in writing deals with balcony enclosures. Lisa Simon from Building 5 asks, what is happening with the enclosure of the balconies? What is happening with the group application? For this question, Ryan will be answering.
Hi, thank you for the question, Lisa. The position from the Department of Buildings on this matter has shifted numerous times in contradictory ways. The last time we shared a plan for this with the co-op was before COVID-19, and obviously COVID-19 crisis has changed the timeline for many things. Also, during the past year, our consultants submitted test cases to the Department of Buildings for feedback on the latest requirements. Currently, management is working with our attorney to draft documents so that shareholders may install new enclosures if they choose to do so. Once this is ready, we will communicate with all shareholders.
Excellent. There are two questions now regarding the proposed Empire Station development project, which is just north of Penn South. Mary Citarella from Building 8A writes, what is the board's stance on the next excessive development atrocity that Albany wants to jam into our neighborhood, the Empire State Station project? And can the board formally voice opposition to it, to our governor, and all of our elected officials on behalf of the Penn South community? The Empire Station plan calls for 8 towers and 20 million square feet of commercial around the current Penn Station. The plan in its current form is a disaster for Penn South and the larger community. I'm also going to combine this with the next question, which was very similar. Michael and Helen Bornesnay from Building 7B write, the Empire State Complex with 10 towers, some Empire State building sized, will very severely disrupt our Penn South community during the many years of construction and once it is completed. Since number one, we have a new governor who is not so invested in this mega development. Number two, more of us are working from home. And number three, the city is working to decrease density through congestion pricing. Shouldn't Penn South via its board aggressively oppose this project? And for these two questions, we're going to have Amber respond.
I happen to mention this topic in a recent president's report because I want our residents to understand and learn about this topic. If this project goes through, it will have a major impact on our community, not only while it's being built, but after it's built as well. Yes, I will bring this to the Board of Directors for discussion, and I hope the board does take a formal position on this.
Okay. The next question is related to laundry machines. Abby Eckstein and Paul Kane of Building 3A write, every time we do laundry, there are at least 4 machines that are out of order. What can be done to reduce the frequency of the breakdown of Hercules machines? And for this, Ryan is going to answer.
Okay, I'll look into this with our laundry vendor. Just so everyone knows, we get monthly reports on machine breakdowns, and we work with our vendor to expedite repairs. It's fairly common for washing machines to require maintenance. Hercules has been good about arriving 24 hours within that time frame to make repairs. However, lately parts may be on back order longer than normal as the entire world is dealing with supply chain delays. If any individual machine breaks down over and over again, despite the repairs, we can ask Hercules to replace it. Our current contract extension is expiring in 2023, and the board will be forming, as they have in the past, a subcommittee called the Laundry Committee to work with management and our architectural consultant over the next year and a half to bid out the next contract, including new machines and room upgrades.
Great. We have a second, slightly different question about laundry rooms. This is from Christine Johnson and Stella Grove of Building 8B. They write that the laundry room, when you're adding money to the laundry cart, it is extremely difficult to see information with 20/20 vision as the lettering on the machine is too small and the machine near the dryer is equally difficult as its placement is on a bad angle. Ryan, can you take this question too?
Sure. I just wanted to point out that we also created instructions for operating machinery, and this is in larger font, so it might be helpful to refer to those signs. However, we constantly bring this type of feedback to our vendors and seek solutions. We appreciate the question. We'll bring this up with our laundry operator. As I mentioned earlier, in 2022, the board is scheduled to create a laundry committee to help develop a bid to seek improvements in the laundry rooms and services provided.
Okay. The next question deals with the elevators under COVID. Sasha Karas from Building 8B writes, when riding alone in the elevator, may we have a sign at the elevator that says, ride alone, okay. I'm not comfortable excluding anyone otherwise. Sometimes a security problem emerges when a person is ahead waiting and the elevator has already been there. Why didn't the person get on? Ryan, we'll have you answer this question too.
Yeah, currently the sign does indicate that if someone wishes to ride alone, that others should allow them to do so. And this is a good reminder to all cooperators for all us to respect each other. And if someone requests to ride in the elevator alone, please let them do so.
Great. The next questions relate to the ground lease. Jean Mercier from Building 5 writes, advised that the board decided on changes to the commercial lease 5 on our property. What options were on offer? Amber, would you take this question?
Yes. We mentioned in our presentation today that we actually had 3 possible options that would be available to us. The first one was to fix the current building, and we did research this thoroughly. However, under this scenario, we would not be able to generate enough income to make it worthwhile. As Ryan mentioned in the presentation, we are prohibited from taking out an additional loan, which means that the money would have to be raised upfront through maintenance increases, which we knew were unacceptable to our residents. The second option was to find a partner to build an all-commercial building, such as an office building, but this option offered significantly less income with a much larger building. And the third option was to find a partner to build a residential over commercial building. And that's the option that we selected.
Okay. The next question regarding the ground lease comes from Edri Amy Cody from Building 10, who asks, why were cooperators blindsided by the urgent call to vote on Building 5 without adequate background? For this question, Ryan.
Well, first, some of the repairs to the current building could not be deferred any longer. All the leases are expiring in 2022. Businesses will not invest in a space without a promise of a long-term lease. The board needed to maintain the integrity of the bid and file non-disclosure agreements until they were allowed legally to publicly do so. After the advisory survey was sent out, the best bidder for the project, residential over commercial, was selected. And they need to meet the deadline for Affordable New York program. If we missed the deadline for submission, it would left us with 100% market rate apartments. This would change the whole nature of the deal. It would change the size of the building, and quite frankly, it may not be able to be afforded to build if they didn't have this subsidy.
Okay. There's another question about the ground lease, and this comes from John Beesing from Building 8B. He writes, did you or will you insist in the contract with MAG that only union labor is to be used?
So one of the things and benefits that we have with MAG Partners as a development partner is that they are committed to union harmony as a developer. This means that they will have both union and non-union contractors on the job. Both subcontracting groups, union and non, will bid on work. This is what they have occurring on 28th Street. There's been no issues. Once the building is constructed, the staff will be 32B and J union.
Another question regarding the ground lease comes from William Schaffner from Building 8B. William writes, when commercial building 5 has been torn down, what prevents the developer from telling MRH that they have decided that they have to build a 21-story building of market rate apartments for which the property is zoned to make it worth their while, or else they will walk away? For this question, I believe we're going to have our attorney, Dean Roberts, answer. And Dean, you are on mute. Thank you.
Sorry. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dean Roberts from the firm of Norris McLaughlin. We have the privilege of being your general counsel. The contractual obligations with the developer are very tightly structured in the ground lease itself, and therefore they cannot change those terms, coupled with the very large deposit they have with the co-op to ensure compliance with those agreements.
The next question regarding this comes from Christine D'Angelo from Building 6A, who asks, when is the demolition and construction of the new building going to begin?
So I'll answer that, Mario. Preparatory work will occur next spring. However, this work is non-disruptive. Demolition is likely to start in 2023. The construction of the new building will take a couple of years, and we don't yet have an exact construction timeline, though our developer is consulting with their consultants and experts, and the DOB. Once they have the details of a finalized construction schedule, they'll share it with Mutual and we'll share it with the shareholders. We plan on establishing channels of communication for shareholders to get frequent updates during the construction phase. We expect that cooperators in buildings 4 and 8 will especially be interested in knowing what days the noisy work will occur. And so the time for this comes, so when the time comes for this type of detailed information will be available for all shareholders who choose to find out. And we will make a pledge to communicate through web and through e-blast and through communications to those that don't have access to email.
Great. The next question comes from Rosita Haran from Building 4, who writes, on 26th Street, we have a side passage access to our park and gym. I would like to know during construction of the new building, will that be open? And after this new 26th Street building is completed, I hope we do not have light pollution.
So a good point, a great question. Referring to the sidewalk between the parking garage and the commercial 5 driveway, we have asked the developer not to shut down that sidewalk and only to do so under safety concerns during the construction for minimal periods of time. For the duration of the project, we asked them to put in sidewalk bridging, similar to what we have around the south side of the development, to help keep the walkway open while construction is being done. In terms of light pollution, we're working with the developer to make sure that during the construction-related periods, disruptions such as sound and light are minimized whenever possible. And once the building is constructed, there are restrictions in the ground lease that they cannot have excessive light coming from the building.
Great. I'm going to make take a pause for a second here to remind people who are interested in asking a live question that the way to do this is to refer to the link that's on the screen if you have Zoom. The link is meeting.pennsouth.coop/2021 question. A few people post questions in the chat box, and that was not supposed to be on. We turned the chat box off. When it comes time for your question, we will bring people in one at a time to ask their question live on video if they have Zoom, or if they're a telephone caller, we'll bring them on with their audio, but we are not going to be taking chat box questions during the meeting. And I will go back to the written questions, which we have quite a few more. The next few deal with packages. Mary Ann Castle from Building 7B asks, why can't the empty rooms in many, if not all buildings on lobby floors be converted to package rooms with locks and keys for easy entrance? This would prevent package theft and also respect the UPS and other delivery people who simply cannot deliver packages to each and every apartment in all of Penn South's buildings. For this question, Amber, will you take this?
Yes, the package idea is a very interesting idea. Currently, the spaces, just so you know, that are on the that are in our building are all being utilized through either community rooms or professional offices, supply areas, or we have the cooperators' storage lockers. However, we have formed a package committee, which is open to all cooperators, and it's meeting regularly to discuss alternatives that may work for us. I'll make sure that you are included in the next meeting, and then you can join in this discussion. If you're interested in joining the package committee or any of the other open board committees, please send an email to lettersToTheBoard@pennsouth.coop, and you'll go out on next month invitation.
Okay, there's another package question. This one comes from Ina Zenin from Building 6A, who asks, do you think it would be a good idea to have Amazon lockers in the buildings? I think so.
I know that yeah, I'll continue with the package lockers. I think there are pros and cons and obviously costs that are associated with this option. But again, I'll send out some information for you to join the committee and join in the discussions. And we can get some feedback on whether or not people in the community feel that, you know, the opportunity for pursuing this outweighs any of the costs. But please join the committee if you're able to get more detailed information on this option.
Okay, the next question deals with the HVAC assessment. Daniel Pelzig from Building 8B writes, the cooperators were told when the HVAC plan was initiated that the HVAC surcharge would be for 5 years. I see now that it has been added to our maintenance. I'm confused as to why that HVAC charge has now been added. Can you explain this?
I'll take that question. Matthew Borelli here, treasurer. Thank you, Daniel, for your question. It's a question we've been getting. When we established the HVAC project in 2011, we took a 30-year mortgage. At the time, we opted for a 10-year assessment, and then we attempted to extend that assessment with HPD, but they balked at that idea. They did not want to see the cost of the payment being added to share prices, which would then make it less affordable for people to move into Penn South. And this is a big concern of the board, that we keep down the cost of purchasing apartments at Penn South. Even though the assessment was for 10 years, we had a 30-year mortgage, and we need to continue to pay that. We have to pay those expenses to the bank that we borrowed all that money from.
Okay, the next question deals with diversity. Blaine North from Building 3B writes, it is pretty striking that to date there has been little diversity on the board of directors or in the management leadership at Penn South. Looking at the slate of candidates, the pattern of mostly white men leading the co-op continues. Is there a plan for outreach and encouragement of a more diverse leadership group, both in the board of directors and in the management office?
I can tell you that I absolutely agree with you. And I think this is a very important question and a very important topic for our co-op. This is also something that the board absolutely recognizes. And we know that there's tremendous work that needs to be done in this area. As a first step, the board has created a committee that's called Conversations in Color. And this is an open committee. All cooperators are welcome. And the committee discusses issues of diversity. They have monthly meetings, and they also host special events on this topic. We know that by addressing these issues in an open forum, that we're going to be encouraging more inclusion. And we're hoping by doing this that we will create opportunities for new leaders to emerge. Hopefully one of them, as a new leader, will eventually end up running for the board.
Okay, the next question we received in writing deals with noise and dog barking. Deborah Raymer from Building 4 writes, I'm grateful to live here, and I acknowledge that New York City is a noisy city. There are noise sources at Penn South that are under our control, though, and keep cooperators from the quiet enjoyment of their apartments. Number one, maintenance. Can they please turn the volume down on their walkie-talkies when they are inside a building or apartment? The high volume they use indoors is very loud and grating. Number two, cooperators' dogs that bark incessantly inside and out on terraces. Perhaps we can institute penalties for cooperators whose dogs continue to disturb the peace after 10, 20, or 30 complaints. Thank you.
All right, Mario, yeah, I'll handle this. Thank you for the question. Regarding maintenance employees turning down the work, absolutely. I will talk to the supervisors and have this addressed with the staff. Regarding the dog barking, please reach out to our legal coordinator, Monica Zayak, and we will investigate each case and take the appropriate steps.
Okay, this is the next question is similar and was grouped together for that reason. Sachiko Nishimura from Building 2B writes, "Hi there. My question is, does Penn South have a policy that addresses excessive dog barking? It seems as though one of my neighbors leaves her dogs unattended for lengthy periods of time or makes little or no effort to control their barking. Thank you." For this policy question, I'm going to ask Amber to reply.
We don't have a policy specific to dog barking, but we do have policies related to disturbances caused by your neighbors, and this would absolutely fall under that. If the noise continues, as Ryan said, please reach out to the office and we can have legal counsel become involved if necessary, and sometimes they can help both parties sit down to get a better understanding and get some resolution that'll work for both neighbors.
The next question comes from Howard Babich from Building 3B, who writes, one issue that has become a frequent matter of discussion recently and will directly affect the lives of all Penn South cooperators is congestion pricing. Whether or not cooperators own cars, congestion pricing will affect everyone who shops in our local stores or uses taxi cabs for hire, vehicles such as Uber and Lyft. So my question is, has the board taken, or is the board willing to take a position on congestion pricing? And we'll direct this question also to Amber.
First, I'd just like to explain what this means for people who may not be following this issue closely. Under the proposed program of congestion pricing, anybody who lives below 60th Street would be taxed an additional $15 or possibly more per day for using a vehicle that they own. Congestion pricing, the way it's being currently proposed, places a really unfair burden on both Penn South, NYCHA housing residents, and other middle class and working class families. And people shouldn't be punished for the neighborhood that they live in. However, the board has not discussed this yet, but I think they should, and I will again be bringing this forward as a topic. I know that a lot of Penn South residents have been speaking publicly about this, not only because, as Howard mentioned, they might own a vehicle, but because the fact that we have commercial tenants and they might be impacted by this proposal. This is of great concern to everybody who lives here.
I'm going to take a moment just to remind folks who are calling in or on Zoom to ask a question. We are going to get to you when we finish with the written questions, provided it's one question per participant. So if you've asked a written question, we will go only to people who have not asked a written question. But I also want to remind people who are joining the Zoom that that's the only purpose for joining it. So if you are calling to observe the program, we ask that you use the link on our Penn South website to watch if you're only here to watch. And we will get to the live questions after we finish with written ones. The next couple deal with infrastructure projects. And the first comes from Mead Ali of Building 5. Mead writes, considering Penn South's mixed success with funding and executing capital improvement projects, example, HVAC overhaul circa 2009, 40+ million overrun, elevator modernization from skip stop to all floors circa 2005, shrunken elevator car, window replacement circa 1997, low quality windows. What plans are presently in effect to both fund and ensure quality control over the significantly larger electrical infrastructure modernization and the equally hefty plumbing infrastructure modernization? Based on the similarity, I'm going to also combine this with a question that was posed by Caitlin Cahill from Building 2A, just based on similarity, who asks, what is the plan for financing our future infrastructure needs? For this question, we're going to direct it to Matthew.
Thank you, Mead and Caitlin, for this question. The board regularly inspects our infrastructure and plans for their replacement. This long-term planning is now being done in conjunction with our HUD loans. We have a capital reserve account called the Reserve for Replacement, and it helps us be prepared when these projects occur. The long-term planning committee and work has been done since I've been on the board. It's a regular process that we go through. HUD requires a 5-year inspection of our property. We bring in a third party to do this evaluation, and we adjust our long-term plans accordingly. It's impossible to predict what costs will be 5 and 10 years from now, but it's important to have a long-term budget of capital projects. Again, in 2017, we are building up a reserve fund ahead of time, rather than to have to raise money by borrowing money or go to the individual cooperator for carrying charge increases. This is something that the board takes very seriously, has worked very hard on over the years. The projects that were mentioned in the earlier part of the question, the HVAC, the elevators, the windows, I happen to have been involved with all of those projects, and I know that we did very detailed analysis of them. We made our best efforts to pick the proper vendors, and I think that we have maintained costs so far, and I'm confident that we will continue to maintain costs as well as figure out ways to pay for them going forward. Thank you.
Okay, Caitlin Cahill from Building 2A had asked a number of questions in her written email, and normally we restrict to 1 question per shareholder, but in this case they all covered similar topics, and because of that we're going to break it into chunks and see if each one can be answered one by one. So the second of those was, in what ways is our board working with government officials to address maintenance and infrastructure needs? Please be specific. And we'll direct this to Amber.
Hi, this is an excellent question. On the first question, I think is related to, I'm going to break it up and just talk a little bit about the maintenance part of the question. The most important example of us working with government officials is our current contract with the city. We receive $30 million a year in property tax abatement. In May, I testified before City Council, and we received an additional 5 years to the tax abatement, which will now expire in 2057. So the tax abatement helps us keep maintenance down for our shareholders. terms of the infrastructure part of the question, typically we receive benefits through programs like the J51. J51 is a tax abatement program for residential buildings for capital improvements. The J51 program is currently expiring, and we're engaging with our elected officials to fight to have it renewed. Most recently, we've spoken to our elected officials regarding Commercial 5. We wanted to see if there was any additional money that would be available, or that they knew that would be available to help us offset the costs of the buildings. And through those conversations, we were basically able to identify that we had to pursue this through finding a different way of financing than through grants or through additional abatement programs.
As I mentioned before, there's a few multifaceted aspects of this question. So the next piece was, how can we avoid privatization of our land in the future? Amber?
We're not legally allowed to privatize. Our tax abatement contract was just extended until the year 2057. And we're not allowed to sell property without city approval. So the board has no intention of pursuing this.
Okay, the last piece of this question, since we broke it up into a few, is what are the future plans for more participation or engagement of cooperators in advance of important decisions? If you don't have any specific plans, please share your thoughts on this and what it could look like. What are the mechanisms for community input on the use of our land and green spaces? So for this too, we're going to ask Amber to respond.
Okay, I'm going to try to capture all of them. There are a couple questions in here. The board's always interested in finding better ways to communicate with shareholders. One of the things that we've done recently is last year we've added a letters to the board email address to make it easier for cooperators to either ask questions or share some of their ideas or concerns. We're also going to be starting a new component to the communications committee, and we're going to be pursuing ways that make it easier for us to do just what you're saying, is for us to communicate with shareholders and also shareholders to communicate with the board. And in terms of input on the green spaces, we have a shared spaces committee, which is open to cooperators, not just board members. You can learn more about joining that committee by emailing letters to the board at pennsouth.coop.
Great. The next question in writing comes from Joanna Klemenko from Building 8A, who writes, secondhand smoke is a documented toxin. It penetrates walls, travels through risers, air conditioners, and open windows. Penn South policy states that cooperators are prohibited from subjecting neighbors to smoke. However, the onus is left on neighbors suffering from that smoke to inhale mediation. Smoke frequently comes from multiple sources. In addition to smoking in apartments, people smoke out of windows and on terraces. When will Penn South finally enact a no internal smoking policy? Since this is a legal issue, we're going to direct this one also to our co-op attorney, Dean Roberts.
Ms. Kalinko, that's an excellent question. It's a very serious issue that both the board and management deals with and considers regularly because it affects the quality of life for shareholders. As you clearly know, there is a policy in place for this issue that if you have this issue, you should contact the legal coordinator, and that policy can be implemented to try to address your concern and problem. As for the no smoking portion of your question, that is a fascinating issue and one that's very much in flux here in New York. Many buildings are wrestling with this, but currently there's a great deal of legal uncertainty on how you can implement that policy for existing shareholders because you are affecting, a material term of the occupancy agreement. And it's a very complex and still unsettled issue, but it is an issue that is clearly being dealt with and has the board's and management's attention.
The next few questions deal with open spaces. Rebecca Newworth from Building 2A asks, how can we create more opportunities for cooperators to use and enjoy our wonderful space, more chances to garden, perhaps to get in a game of ping pong, or have a picnic in an actively used area? And for this, we will direct it to Amber.
Great question. Yes, I am pleased to have mentioned in my president's report that the board has approved a new green space, which is going to be opening on 25th Street. This is the site of the old HVAC storage area. Our landscape architect recommended this area because of its prior use. The ground was already level and there is infrastructure there for both lighting and for water. We are very pleased to be pursuing this. There is too many people on the wait list for the garden, and this will make a huge difference. Good news on that front. In terms of the picnic area, the active recreation area behind Building 7 is a great place to have a picnic and enjoy the beautiful grounds.
Great. And as I mentioned, we grouped together some of the questions about open space together. The next one, Judy Cohen in Building 2A submitted 2 related questions about the new garden space near Building 5 that you just mentioned. This was prefaced by a lengthy statement, too long to read right now, and we don't read statements. So I'm going to jump to the questions themselves. Number 1, will you agree to pause this major decision over use of community green space that was made by just a few people in order to have a community-wide consideration, such as meetings and or a survey of the use of all our green spaces? And part 2, question 2 of this related is, do you agree to publicly announce the Shared Space Green Spaces Committee, possibly as a subcommittee of the Environmental Committee, and open it to any cooperator who has expertise and or is interested, and to pause further work until an expanded committee is in place? And for this, we will direct this also to Amber.
I announced the new green space in my president's report, and it was also mentioned recently in the manager's report. Although we have a location to work with, the group has not yet met, and there's no decisions that have been made at all to this point. I would encourage you to join the Shared Space Committee, which is an open committee. And if you'd like to participate, you please email letters to the board at pennsouth.coop for more information, and you will be included at the next meeting on this topic.
The next question also relates to these open space topics. Gilbert Gayton from Building 6B writes, I'm hoping that there will be some arrangement for seniors who are less physically able to garden. By this, I'm asking that perhaps some related planting tables like those I have seen next door at Holy Apostles. These raised planters enable a gardener who is unable to work on the ground to reach plants, potting mix, and containers to have a real gardening experience. I hope this reaches the board in time. Thanks for the opportunity to raise this question. Amber, can we direct this to you also?
Yeah, I'll continue with this. Thank you, Gilbert. This is an excellent idea, and it's an idea that has come to the board several times before. So we can make sure that raised planning is incorporated into the new green space.
We're reaching the final question that was submitted in writing by shareholders. So that means after this question, folks who are waiting to ask a live question on Zoom, just want to ask everybody to be prepared as we move you in one at a time. Please make sure that you are unmuted and ready to ask your question. And if we don't hear from you, we will move quickly to the next person. But the final question that was submitted in writing comes from Caitlin Hickerson from Building 2A, who asks, has any thought been put in to opening up some of our copious lawn space to allow for folks to sit, perhaps even designate some areas with tables and chairs?
Okay.
And this last question we will direct to Amber.
Also, this is a great question. We do have the sitting area behind Building 7, but there is a lot of interest in expanding that. I think this is a great idea for the Shared Space Committee to take up. Perhaps there's ways not only to incorporate more tables and chairs in the new green space, but maybe there are other areas of Penn South that we could also utilize for people's enjoyment.
So I want to say thank you to all the cooperators who submitted a question in writing before the program. And now we will move to the live questions. The first one is going to be from Sarah Durand. So we will move Sarah into the panelist portion of this so that Sarah may ask her question. And when Sarah joins us, you may just begin. Okay, if Sarah is not available, Sarah, we're going to actually remove you from the meeting.
Okay,
you're welcome
I'm
to
here.
try back up. Go ahead.
I didn't mute. I'm so sorry. City parks, the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, many environmental organizations advise quickly moving away from installation of homogeneous green lawns and ornamental plantings, and instead moving towards installation of native flowering plant meadows and gardens. And of course, our ongoing garden would support this, but vegetation that supports our catastrophically declining bird and insect populations. The New York Times notes that nearly 1/3 of the wild birds in the United States and Canada have vanished since 1970, a staggering loss, suggesting the very fabric of our ecosystem is unraveling. And similarly, The Guardian cited the same year the world's insects are hurtling down a path to extinction. And I see that we have all of this space very much aligned to the suburban view of what landscaping should look like. And I feel we have such a rich and beautiful area. We will not lose any beauty if we move from homogeneous lawn plantings to plant meadows of our native vegetation. Thanks. And I'm just wondering if we can do this. And I will join the Open Space Committee.
Thank you so much. And just as a reminder too, if folks can indicate what building they live into.
I'm sorry, Building 111J.
Great, thank you, Sarah. We're going to take you out now of this meeting so that we can allow one of the panelists to answer the question.
I'll answer the question because I think it's a great way of looking at how our landscape can better serve the community. And maybe in this regard, we're not talking about people, but I walk by the current Jeff DeLay garden and I see the tremendous variety of insects and birds that are there. I'm hoping by adding this new green space that'll also have this very diverse type of planting, we will just create a larger area to support that. In terms of what you're saying, I think you're referring to some of the larger lawn spaces, I'm not sure, but we do have a landscape architect that we've been working with. And I know that she has come to the shared space committee before. So we'll be sending you, or you should reach us, letters to the board at pennsouth.coop, and we'll get you on that committee and we'll get those ideas presented.
Great. I see a number of people waiting to ask a question. Donay Kinan will be the next person. So we'll move Donay into the meeting. And when you are here, not yet. If the co-host technician can also make an attempt to move Donay, it was not successful for me. We will move to another person and come back. And again, when you join, please remember to state the building that you live in. The next person is Maureen Melee, or Melee, excuse me. So Maureen, when you're part of the meeting, please indicate what building you live in. And you're on mute, so please unmute yourself.
Now can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay, good. I have a question. It's what would be the procedure if somebody was really worried about a neighbor who seemed to be like really mentally ill, and they didn't want to make like a noise complaint? They wanted to make a care about this person kind of query. And I was told to notify PSSS that they had social workers. And I did that, and I was referred to the senior center, and I went to the senior center. And since this person who I'm worried about is not a senior citizen, he's in his 30s, they couldn't help either. And I don't know, I'm told he has family here. I mean, could I make an appointment with somebody down in management and talk to somebody? Or maybe this is an inappropriate question, but I'm just really worried about this guy.
I think it's good information for everyone. Ryan, are you able to answer regarding the protocol in this case?
Yeah, on all situations, we'll take any kind of question like this in confidence. Please give a call to my assistant general manager in charge of administration, Lisa Gluck, and she'll take the next appropriate steps.
Great. The next person, we're going to invite Alice Rydell. And Alice, when you are joined in, please state your building and then you may ask your question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. I've been here for, I think, about 5 years now, and I have windows facing the east. I get the sun glare, but more so now, I get the bounce off of the Hudson Yards mirrored buildings in my place, and it's really hard on my eyes. And I was wondering, is there a policy or procedure? Should I just bite the bullet and hire someone to, get that the windows covered with something that stops that kind of glare? Or is there something I can do through Penn South about this window glare?
This sounds like an operational question. Ryan, can you take this?
Yeah, good question. Interesting, as the buildings go up around us, changes the whole atmosphere, right? So I think I can have our stockroom look into what film can be purchased that we'll have in stock. So if the shareholder wanted such a service, we could apply it for them. But I have to look into it.
The next person I'm going to invite in is Danny Valdez. Danny, when you are in the meeting, please state the building that you live in and then ask your question.
Hi, can you hear me? Great.
We hear you, yes.
Great. My question is about the sandbox playground, and I assume that's going to be heavily impacted by the new construction that will be taking place on Commercial 5. It's a heavily used playground. I personally use it with my kid every day, and I know many other families do. Are there plans to mitigate the loss of that playground with a new playground, or possibly redeveloping somehow the city playground across from the power station? It would be a huge loss, especially for Building 6 where I am and Building 8 that's adjacent to it to lose that playground. So, and the community overall, I feel like. So I just wanted to see if there were any plans for that. Thank you.
Yeah, Mario, I'll attempt to answer that. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yep.
So the playground does need to be updated. We're looking at the timetable, and as Matthew mentioned, it's on our long-term capital projects. That's one of them. We're also going to see about what we can do about the developer minimizing what portion of the park that needs to be closed down during construction. And we're also looking at creative solutions with our landscape architects. And we'll be bringing back ideas to the board for consideration, and then ultimately the community.
Great. The next person who's waiting to ask a question is Susan. Susan doesn't have a last name listed, but we will move her in to the meeting. Susan, please indicate the building that you live in. If you don't mind giving your full name, and then we'll answer your question.
Okay, I assume this is me. Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's Susan Wallet and Building 2B.
Great.
Okay, so my question is, you mentioned a number of committees. Is there a list anywhere of the committees that are open to cooperators? Like a complete list?
I'm going to actually answer that question since I do the website updates. It's an excellent suggestion, and we should be able to have something by early this coming week with the list of all of the open committees. We'll put that on the Board of Directors page since these are committees of the Board of Directors. So let's say by Tuesday, if you want to check the Penn South website, pennsouth.coop, and go to the Board of Directors page, I'd be happy to put a list of all of the open committees that shareholders can join and how people can join those. I'm going to move to the next person waiting. I do believe, so just, I see Done is asking to still be part of the meeting. When we invited you in, seems like you rejected being added to the meeting. So we'll try back one more time with you after the next couple of callers. So I see Luana Green. We will move Luana into the meeting. And please state the building you live in. Hi, Luana. It looks like you muted yourself.
Okay. Yeah,
There
I
we
can
go.
hear now. Thank you. So hi, I'm Luana Green from 8A. Hi, everyone. Thank you for this meeting. I have a two-part question. It involves the developers. Initially, when we were having the meeting with the board, you quoted as receiving $2 million from the developer. Now it's significantly less. It's $700,000. And could you explain that? And also, I heard the lawyer say, if I'm not mistaken, that you received a deposit from the developer. If you can explain that also. Thank you.
Sure, Luana, how are you? No problem. So I think you misunderstood. So the development rent will be 2.1 million, and that's what we've been consistently saying to the cooperative. The net difference is the 700,000 from pre-pandemic level. So I think that's where the disconnect is. Also, the advance payment is what Dean had been referring to. So that's $5.5 million the co-op would get in advance upon commencement. We did not receive this money yet. It's upon commencement. And the way it's structured is the first year we'll be drawing out of that escrow account of that money to pay the monthly rent. And then the balance of the funds in the account will be drawn out at a 50% rental payment each month for the next 2 years. So we'll have 50% going in to the payment process, and the developer will have to pay the other 50%. So this is part of the completion guarantee.
And I'm going to just also step in and just add a little bit more detail to this question, because I don't know if the cooperator's here, but I've been asked this question before, so I want to make sure it's captured. So the initial $2.1 million is a starting point. On top of that, there's going to be a 2% increase per year. When we get to year 11, we're going to have a big jump to $3.1 million a year in income from this commercial tenant, with the additional 2% increases per year to continue. Also, there'll be 3 rate resets that are built into the ground lease. There's going to be one at year 26, one at year at 51, and one at year at 76. So that gives you a really full picture of the kind of money that we're talking about from this commercial tenant. And it's significantly different than, from an income standpoint, than the rest of our income tenants can provide us.
Can I also weigh in briefly? So Luana, hey Luana, how you doing? We currently collect 1.7. We pay taxes from that 1.7. And that brings it down to by 300,000, or 1.4 is what we keep. We are going to go to 2.1 from the 1.4. There's where the 700,000 future cash flow will come in addition to what Amber just said, the add-ons that will occur over the coming decade.
Thank you, everybody. We only have a few more callers, so we'll try to see if we can get to folks. I'm going to give one more chance to donate, so we'll add you back to the meeting. Please make sure to state the building you live in and then ask the question.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, great. I couldn't unmute before.
Perfect. Well, we're here now.
Building 1, apartment 19G. Just a question about the brickwork being done on the buildings. Wondering if there is any update, or if we can receive periodic updates. At building 1, I haven't really seen any work being done. And I'm concerned, would like to get our apartments back together because I've taken everything off the walls.
Yes, this is Ryan. How are you? Yeah, absolutely. I'll talk to our operations manager, Lance Williams, and maintenance manager, John Seamer, to make sure that they get timely communications out. They reported that they have been communicating with the building, so I'll dive into why you didn't get a message. As far as the project, we're about, I'd say, at the 75% completion. Each drop will yield its different level of work that's required. They don't know until actually they do the physical drop. And then that's in consultation with our engineering consultants to agree on the prescribed work. So we're moving nicely. I'm told that we're still on target to be completed by the beginning of the year. So we have our fingers crossed. Unfortunately, the roofing on buildings 2 and 3 will be delayed from being done in 2021 to 2022 because of supply chain issues.
Thank you, Ryan. I'm going to also tell the other tech at this point, since we do have a number of people who've been waiting, we've gotten through a lot of questions. Anybody who's trying to reach now, we're going to cut it off at the people who are currently waiting. In terms of questions, we have quite a few people who made a phone call. It'll be a little trickier, but I'm going to first ask the person whose telephone number ends in a 0208. So if that is the last 4 digits of your telephone number, we are going to add you into the meeting right now. And if you've been waiting patiently, I hope you're able to hear us. I noticed that you have yourself muted. So if you're a telephone caller that's muted, you can unmute yourself by pressing *6. *6 is what to press on your telephone to unmute.
I think that worked.
Excellent. Please say the building you live in and your name, and then we can get to your question.
Yes, thanks. I was working earlier, so I've tuned in late, but I'm glad I got a chance to ask a question. It's Daniel Reinish. I'm in Building 5, Apartment 21C. And this may have been addressed before. I'm assuming it would, but I'm just curious, because what kind of financial measures and steps are taken in terms of long-range planning of keeping maintenance costs down, monthly maintenance costs down or reasonable for families who are low income and that sort of thing?
I feel like that question already came up before. Amber, do you want to just very briefly say what you said earlier to
I think Matthew also covered it.
Yeah, Matthew also covered it. I'll let Matthew step in here.
Okay. So we actively plan for, have a long-term planning process in place. It's been there for decades. We have a budget that we look at every 5 years. We bring in a third-party vendor to help us, keep track of these measures. We track our income very actively, and over the years, we've done a number of projects, windows, elevators, HVAC, and we've been able to keep our maintenance and carrying charges under control. We cannot be 100% sure that 5 years from now, we can predict what those projects we have on our list will cost, but we are doing our best efforts on a regular basis. We also have a reserve that we fund actively, and we've been doing that for the last 3 or 4 years. And if you look at the annual report, there is a budget in there, and you can see what kind of numbers we're talking about for the coming year, and what portion we will be covering with withdrawals from our reserve account. So again, I think we've been doing an excellent job over the years, having watched this on all of those long-term projects from many years ago. We've been very successful, and I see no reason why we won't continue to be successful as long as we remain vigilant in looking at income and possible outflows.
Thank you, Matthew. And I'm glad you mentioned the annual reports, because if you really want detailed information, that booklet really has a lot that we were not able to cover in all today's presentations. I'm going to go through a couple more of the telephone callers. Now I see someone who has the last 4 digits, 9586. For that person, when you are here, please press *6 to unmute yourself. I see that you're muted. *6 will unmute you, and we'll give you a second to join, say your name and building. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you. Please state your name and building.
Okay. Judy Van Camp, Building 3A. And my question is about the commercial property and the upcoming MAG project. How come this became such a monster? Why was this building not being monitored from the day it was built forward? It seems like it was not being monitored and fixed as they went along. How did it develop into such an emergency? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I'm not sure which of the panelists wishes to answer that question.
Ryan, you spoke a little bit earlier about the condition of the building going into the commercial bidding process. Maybe you can give us a little bit more background into what it's led us.
Sure, Amber. Thank you for the question. I don't think the term emergency is accurate. The board has been meeting and discussing what to do with this building for many years. They've brought on consultants, they've brought in brokers, they've had several tenants that would look to take over the building perhaps, but through the analytics of their due diligence, every tenant walked away from the project because of the amount of capital that would have to be put into the building in order to make it work for them. The inception of this building, you could tell and see very quickly that it's a special use building designed for the tennis use because there's no windows or anything, obviously. So that really limits what can be put in the space. For the tennis court to operate, it has a special BSA variance and no other occupancy should just move right in there. These are all things the board considered over many, many years. As far as what led us to the decision-making process, the board went out to a competitive bid using our consultants at the time. And when the bids came back, the thing that made the most sense for highest of best use based on the restrictions that the board put in place, because we don't want a tower here, right? We want a supermarket, we want it at a certain height. So there's restrictions on this. The competitive bid yielded the best return on investment for the co-op is a mixed use building. Up until the point of getting the bids, the board could not really discuss publicly because we had to maintain the integrity of the closed bid. Once the board was legally able to communicate, they did, and they reached out to community based on two options that made the most sense for this co-op, which was a full use commercial building or a mixed use building. And by the math and the economics, you could see that the mixed use scenario yielded 50% higher return for the co-op for a consistent income. And that's where we are today.
Ryan, may I add one point to that?
And I would add something to that too after Dean.
I also would differ with the assessment of an emergency because prior boards implemented a policy to have those leases terminate approximately in the same time frame. So this issue of this building's problems have been known for many, many, many years, and the boards have tried to deal with it previously. This is simply the best course of action given what the experts have told us.
Yes, and I would add into what the two of them have just said, which is that the problem evolves around the rentability of the buildings. It was described that there were no windows above the ground level. The primary renter there was the tennis court. They had a very long-term lease. And then we did have, and I guess it could be said that it flies in the face of my statements that we have a long-term capital budget. Well, we do for that. We had it for that building as well. And what we saw was the difficulty in really implementing that. And as it went along, the expenses associated with that, hamstrung by the leases that we had, whether they be coming due in 22, where we couldn't negotiate long-term leases with people that we knew we'd have to do capital work at a level that would not allow occupancy, as well as the tennis renter who really needed the rent to come up. That rent rate set what goes back decades prior to my being even on the board. So we had a set of circumstances that were evolving that the board was aware of. The board was struggling to come up with solutions for many years. And we're hopeful that numbers would come in at levels that we could afford to do it, but the expenses were astronomical, and it would be painful for our cooperators to have to pay for it. If you read the manager's report, you will see a large amount of numbers that he goes over in great detail that help you understand this. So it wasn't just that we weren't paying attention. It was that there were a confluence of things that came together that just this, in certain regards, pushed us in this direction. I hope that helps.
All right, we're going to move to the next caller. I think Matthew's last point about referring to the annual reports is an excellent one. This was covered extensively in the video portion of the presentation at the beginning that started at noon. And it's also in the manager's, president's, and treasurer's report in this booklet. So again, I'm going to try to get through the last of the questions. We have Jay Aslander. I'm going to move you into the panelist portion. Please state your name and the building you live in. Okay, if there's no response, some people may have left their device on but are not near it. So we're going to go to the next person. The telephone number ending in 1670. If that's your telephone number, please move, please put yourself on, I should say, please remove mute by pressing *6 and state your name and the building you live in.
Hello? Can you
Yes,
hear me?
we can hear you. Yes.
Yes, my question is this.
Please state your name and the building you live in first.
Carmen Hendershot, building 8A, apartment 18E.
Thank you.
My question is about the length of the lease with MAG Partners being 99 years, by which time any of the people living would be dead and they wouldn't even live to recover whatever the profit would be after that time. So isn't there some way that we can reduce that so that we don't have a length of lease that's going into our great-grandchildren's time?
Can we direct this one to Dean Roberts? Because I think this is more about ground leases in general, not necessarily our specific ground lease.
Thank you. The standard protocol for ground leases is to have these very long terms because we are asking these people to, in essence, invest millions and millions and millions of dollars to build this building. So that is spread out over the time. The key here is there are readjustment periods in the ground lease to reset the rents. So this is a completely standard deal, except that it has built-in increases, which is actually a very good point toward our negotiations in that we were able to get resets. But the term of the lease is completely standard and is normal given the economics of this transaction.
Excellent. To my other technician on this, if you don't mind also helping me keep track of which numbers have already called, and we'll remove them from the meeting entirely. We have just a few more people. I see DJQ. If DJQ is the name that you have for your Zoom, please be ready to answer. If there's no response, I'm going to assume you're away from your device, and we will move on to the next caller. For somebody whose telephone number ends in a 2384, we'll move you into the meeting. And yes, we can hear you now.
Hi, this is Helen Rosenberg in 6B. I understand the co-op was limited in providing information to cooperators once bid solicitation went out for Building 5. But I'm wondering, was there any discussion, and does anyone on the board or administration now feel they should have and could have involved cooperators in the process earlier when would that have been in the process, so that this last minute involvement in cooperators and drastic changes philosophically and physically for our future never or rarely happen in the future? And I compare that to the fact that we were consulted about the lighting in our hallways.
Okay,
Thank you.
I mean, I do think this also came up in an earlier question, which Amber addressed through Communications Committee. I don't know if anything more needs to be said. Does anyone wish to add more to what was stated?
I think it's important to clarify. So two different things here, like the lighting that's going on or things that are happening in the co-op that our cooperators participate in, like the lighting or things that are very specific to the buildings, is very different than our lease negotiations. Lease negotiations legally don't happen in a public forum. Any of the leases that we have, cooperators have never been involved in and have helped to come in to personally negotiate. So what happened with Commercial 5 is they are a commercial tenant of ours. The MAG partners will be a commercial tenant and we will be their landlord. So in essence, what's happening here is the same as all of the other tenants that we have, and we're following the same process. The reason why I made the decision to share this is that I felt that this was very unique and that the type of lease that we were entering was different than any other lease negotiation that we had gone into. And I felt like it was very, very important, even if it was under a difficult time constraint, to be able to share whatever information that we had available. I do agree with you about the communication. I think everybody does. Nobody's defending the time frame in terms of where we wish we could have ended up, but we were very concerned about losing the deadline for the Affordable New York program and ending up coming back to cooperators with a building that was 100% market rate, and then cooperators saying to us, now we've missed the deadline to have an opportunity to have affordable as part of this program. So that's the timing as we had it. I think with the new communications committee that the board is creating, that we're going to get much better at communications than we have been in the past. And we actually feel, the board feels that they want cooperators to know about things as quickly as they're happening, because it'll help us. Obviously, when there's more information out there about the work that we're doing, we feel like it's a benefit. So there will be some changes going forward this next year. In addition, specific to Commercial 5, there will be a website where all of the relevant information that's related to that project's going to be posted, so that anybody either in the adjoining buildings or throughout the co-op will have access to that public information.
Speaking of communication, this may be the first time in Penn South's history that every single question will be answered. We're down to 2 people. Jane Buchanan, if you'd like to join, I'm going to move you into the meeting to ask your question. Hi, Jane, if you can state the building that you live in and then ask your question. If you need to unmute yourself, which I see you do, that would be *6 if you're on a phone, but if you're on a device, you should have a pop-up one on your window.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, here's my question coming up. We have been told that we will stay affordable at least through 2056. But how can this be if we were faced with a $500 increase if we did not offer a ground lease for the development of market rate housing to a private developer? Was this difficult choice of a $500 increase in carrying charges, effectively ending affordability, or opening up Penn South space to a private developer, was it fair, ethical, or even legal?
You want me to answer that since it's pressing on legal questions?
Yes.
Ms. Buchanan, as far as the legality of this process, it is absolutely legitimate, and frankly, the board is doing its duty to protect the best interest of all shareholders. The process for this building, as has been explained throughout this meeting, was to find the best way to develop Building 5 that would prevent the co-op from incurring unbelievable expenses, and instead have an income flow that assures the, limited dividend quality of Mutual for the next 50 plus, 35 years. By law, with our agreement with the city, Mutual is bound to be a limited dividend co-op for the next 35 years, until 5057. So in that sense, Mutual cannot be privatized.
If there's nothing more to add, we will go to our final question from a caller whose telephone number ends in 7655. So for the caller, it looks like you need to unmute yourself by pressing *6 on your telephone. I'll give you just a second. It's possible that you're on hold and walked away from your device. Okay, going once, going twice. So that caller is not present, and we have reached the end of all of the questions that have come in from shareholders. I think this is unprecedented. I don't remember in the time I've been here of ever reaching every single question asked by a shareholder at the meeting. So that was quite unique. I'd like to remind everybody that the annual election is still going on. The voting in person began at 2 p.m. today. It'll be going on until 8 p.m. today. And that's in the Building 8A Community Room, which is 343 8th Avenue. It's right where 27th Street runs into 8th Avenue, and you'll see signs posted outside the building. If you have not submitted a proxy, we certainly encourage you to participate and vote. But if you did submit a proxy, you are still able to vote in person, and that supersedes your proxy. It voids it automatically, and only the vote that you cast in person today is counted. So you have until 8 p.m. today to participate in the election. I think we do need to have a motion to close this meeting, and I know Amber is going to give a few closing remarks. So Amber, if you don't mind doing both of those, and then we will have concluded the 2021 annual meeting.
Thank you. I just want to end by thanking everybody for watching. Very happy we were able to get through everyone's questions, even though it meant staying on for a little bit longer meeting. So again, thank you. I want you to know that you have a board of incredibly committed, hardworking shareholders. And I encourage everyone to please read through the annual report so you can see what accomplishments we've been able to address in this very challenging year. And I wanted to say thank you. I now make a motion to adjourn this meeting until the close of our in-person voting.
I second that.
The meeting is now adjourned. Thank you for joining us.